quite a mixed bag of topics, but all with the theme of reminding you of key consumer hacks, if we can call them that. Things to make sure you receive the kind of service you're entitled to, and also things to avoid that you don't fall prey to scammers and con artists. So our listener Patrick wrote to me a couple of weeks ago to relay his experience, and he said the following. Hi Pippa, I flew back from Joburg on Sunday evening and found that my bag had been broken into despite having locks and a security strap around the bag. The same thing happened to my fiancée when she flew back about a month earlier. The MO was the same in both circumstances. Late evening arrivals in Cape Town, quite long delays, longer than normal in the bags arriving on the carousel, and then finding that the locks and the zipper tabs had been cut off. Luckily, neither of us had anything of value in our bags, so nothing was taken. I think they must have been looking for electronic devices. But I wonder if other listeners have also had this happen, and I wonder if perhaps there is a syndicate or gang working at the Cape Town airport. Patrick, thanks for flagging it. Wendy, I know you've been in conversation with the airport's company to try and get someone to join us and speak about the latest stats on luggage theft. Where have you got?
Well, I didn't have any luck until I've just literally, as we went on air, I checked my emails because I've been on the road.
Yeah.
And at 7 minutes past 2, I got this. I'm sharing it almost as I'm reading.
Hot off the press, okay?
Yes, okay. So I asked a number of questions around baggage tampering statistics and also some advice for people. What are the things that are most likely to be taken out of your luggage? I have been reporting, or I was reporting last year and the year before about designer fragrances.
Yes,
that's
I
something
remember
that's
that, yes.
number one. It was the number one item. So let's discover together what the statistics are. Cape Town International Airport fully recovered to 100% of pre-COVID levels on international travel. The domestic travel recovery is 72%. That was a question I wanted.
Okay.
I wanted to see what the levels were like. So we're not quite back and certainly domestically back to 2019. The IATA worldwide target for mishandled bags is 4 in 1,000, and the average is 3.5. This is for bags that are damaged, lost, or tampered with.
Okay.
The Cape Town International average performance is 1.23 bags in 1,000. So basically they're saying well below average. The number of bags pilfered, as officially reported by passengers and airlines, and I think we have to allow for the fact that some people don't report it, is 0.023 in 1,000. That doesn't mean much to many people. So luckily they've translated this into one bag for every 50,000 bags processed in a month. Our internal target is to move to 0 bags. So our listener had, according to these statistics, and his fiancée had particularly bad luck
that it happened to both of them in a month.
Although I must say in 2019 pre-COVID, it happened to me twice in that year.
Yes.
Nothing was taken because I don't have expensive enough fragrance, I suspect. Not even my Doc Martens. I was almost insulted.
Sure, thank heavens for that.
Yes. Anyway, the highest domestic route passenger volume is between OR Tambo in Johannesburg and Cape Town International, and therefore the highest pilferage stats are on this domestic route. We continue to focus, AXA that is, continues to focus on preventing pilferage together with airlines and ground handlers. We work as a network of airports with our colleagues at all airports. Security checkpoints, improved surveillance, automated systems, security audits and blitzes are all part of our response. Perfumes and clothing and electronics are still the goods that are most likely to be pilfered, as I thought. Passengers are encouraged to not check in valuables, to wrap checked in bags. That was a question I asked because the second time it happened to me, my bag had not only a lock on it, but it had one of those covers on. I didn't have it wrapped, but it had a proper cover, and that was taken off and put on skew and everything. And somebody, one of the ground crew, said to me in Cape Town International, maybe it's not such a good idea because the thieves could think that you've got something very valuable,
special, worth protecting
in there. So I've stopped using it, and well, it hasn't happened since. But obviously, that's
interesting.
Complete coincidence. But yes, AXA does suggest wrapping check-in bag and to place locks on bag. Well, mine was just disappeared; it was just gone as if it was never there. This makes it more difficult for anyone to tamper with the bag and also protects the bag during handling. They've ignored my one question, which was in both those cases, there was a delay.
Yes,
a departure
and the bag's
delay.
coming out. Yeah.
And so there was this suspicion that with the bags lying around for longer in those holding areas, that gave the thieves more opportunity.
Yeah,
and that question has been ignored for some reason. But I do think it makes sense from a layperson's point of view. I would imagine that it would make things easier. The longer
it's sitting
the bag
around,
is
the more opportunistic.
Not with you and not on a plane, there's more opportunity. So that's a downside from checking in too early, I would say. But that's just my view.
Interesting,
and anecdotal stuff that I've heard. So there you have it.
Debbie's saying, I think the baggage handlers should be behind glass so that the public can always see what they're up to.
So it's a good point, and I have investigated this issue for many years now.
Yes.
And there are dead spots in the airports when the luggage is out of everybody's sight. Yours, mine, the airlines, the baggage handling managers and whatever. And I mean, when I asked this question during COVID, I was told there's no budget to keep the travelators going, let alone install more cameras and all this sort of thing. And I suppose at that time there was less traffic.
Yeah.
But I do think, and I asked that question, I said, is more budget going to be put on dealing with this issue? Or has budgets generally been so decimated by the COVID era that it's not a possibility? That wasn't also answered now that I'm thinking. I don't have the questions in front of me. But I think reading between the lines, they're saying that the statistics are way below, what is it, 1 in 50,000.
So the target is 4 in 1,000. The average internationally is 3.5 in 1,000, and Cape Town's average is 1.23 per 1,000 bags suffers some form of pilfering or damage. So that's nearly a quarter of the international target rate, which is something to be applauded, I guess. Wendy, I just want to remind listeners of something you told us the last time we discussed this in late 2019, which is the importance of checking your bags before you leave the airport. And I know it's the last thing anybody feels like doing, because you want to get home.
Yes.
And you've come off a long flight, you just want to get home. But you reminded us then it's really important to check it before you leave the airport premises, not so?
Yes, exactly. So you report it then and there, and don't be put off, even if there's always staff at any time of the
day or night.
Yeah.
Because once you've left, the difficulty of proving that it happened in transit at the airline while in their custody becomes that much harder. And then obviously any claim for damages that might arise is more difficult to prove. So do bear that in mind. Check your bag carefully before you hoy it in the back of the car and head home. Okay, well, happy to come back to luggage theft comments a little bit later on. But for now, let's steam ahead with our consumer hacks. And Wendy, you want to start with talking about car purchases because, really you want to remind us that offering to purchase a car is not something that should be done lightly. It sounds to me like you get quite a few complaints linked to this.
I do indeed. So a lot of people regard that OTP, which is not a one-time password in this case, it's a offer to purchase.
Yeah.
They seem to regard it as a kind of form of quote or something, that it's not really binding on them, that they can change their mind and move on and it's fine. And it actually isn't. It is a legally binding document. Some dealerships will... if you've paid a deposit, they will want to keep some of it, and they can, if they can prove, that they got the car for you from another dealership, that they spec'd it in a certain way that you'd requested, and all that kind of thing. Others, I've known of cases that it's happened to them far too many times, so they actually take legal action to force you to continue with the deal that you've signed, because it's all there. Or and others will just whatever. Not happy, but just let you cancel.
Let you go.
So
but you're lucky if
you are
that
lucky.
happens. Yeah.
And they're always very quick to say the motor industry ombudsman, supports us in this. It is a binding document, but so as so often happens when they're on the other side of this thing, when the dealership has a signed offer to purchase with a customer, and for some reason the car gets sold to somebody else. Often the justification is, we didn't realize that two salesmen were working on the same deal, and blah, blah. But they then want to sort of just say, sorry for you, walk away. And I've taken up many of those cases as well, and managed to get them, some justice in the form of getting the dealership to source them a car of similar
spec and
similar
price,
spec at the same price. And I had the case of the Ford dealership in Gauteng, just in the last couple of weeks, and Ford South Africa stepped in and made it right, because in that case they'd also kept his 50,000 rand deposit that they'd asked him to pay. Absolutely.
Sure.
Yes. So just a little reminder about the offer to purchase. And the other thing that struck me while I was investigating that case was that, and I was engaging very closely with the Ombudsman, Johan van Vreden, was this chap it wasn't an in-person deal. He had driven the car, but later they emailed him the offer to purchase to sign, which he did.
Yeah.
And it was blank. And my advice is, and the Ombudsman agreed, is always ask them, the dealership, to sign before they send it to you, so that when you put your signature on, it's signed by both parties, and you know that
this is now a legally binding contract. Yeah.
And the Ombudsman went one step further and said, it must be the dealer principal or the sales manager. The salesman does not have the authority to do it. So don't let that happen. Insist that it's either the dealer principal, the DP, or the sales manager. And I thought that was great advice, and advice that I hadn't heard or given before.
Yeah. So again, just to reiterate, it's once you have submitted the offer to purchase, it is a binding legal contract on both parties who have signed it. So that means they can't just back away and say, sorry, we sold the car to somebody else. But equally, you can't just walk away and say, I changed my mind. Wendy, you should ask some questions before you sign that offer to purchase anyway. What sort of things you should be thinking about? What is the deposit they require, and what would happen if I was to walk away from the deal?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as with any time you're ever asked to pay a deposit, is ask questions around what that deposit means and what its terms are. I think 99% of people just pay it and hope for the best.
Yeah.
Which creates all sorts of drama and unpleasantness if either party pulls out. So in other words, as with all deposits, there should be a sliding scale. So if you sign and then your partner says, are you bad? We can't afford that. And then you sort of immediately want to cancel it. Well, they haven't been put to any trouble on your behalf. If they've got talking specifically about cars, if they've got the car for you, they've put the wheels on that you requested, they've added some accessories, they've turned down
somebody else's
offer, etc., then they can most definitely keep part of your deposit if you've paid a deposit, or they can seek to get that money from you in other ways. But as you say, very important to ask the questions so that both parties know what the stakes are and what will happen if the deal falls apart for some reason.
Really important advice. Thank you so much. Going back to the airline story, Caroline's raising an interesting point here, because Caroline says, I had my lock cut off, my bag rifled through, GHD removed, but nothing else taken. GHD?
It's a hair iron.
Oh, okay. Yes, of course. Okay. Nothing else taken. This was on a flight from Cape Town to PE. But this is the kicker. I didn't report it, she says. Now, that figure of 1.23 was of reported cases at Cape Town
That's
International.
what I said.
Wendy, I'm sure you're going to make the case that even if it is a minor incident, you should be reporting it.
I'm probably guilty of that, because I reported mine to the airline. I have contacts with all the airlines, so I just WhatsApped him and said, can you believe this has happened for the second time? And obviously I don't have stuff that I don't wear designer clothing, and I don't have designer fragrances, and obviously this person thought, oh, well, that was a big waste of time. They're getting the lock off, getting my cover off. And it happened twice. And I think for those of us, and I've heard from other people the same thing, the whole rifle through thing, and then I suppose they've got to find ways, these thieves, these baggage handlers, with sticky fingers, they've got to find ways of getting the stuff out. And if it's not really valuable, they don't want to risk it. Yeah. But I suspect that if it happens and you haven't lost anything, you can see immediately, you then think, well, it's not worth the hassle. But we must report it so that these statistics are
actually accurate.
Because it shouldn't be happening. And we need to know how many times it's happening, whether they take something or not. And it is a horrible thing to happen. I mean, my toiletry bag was open and just the contents strewn everywhere. Just a violation.
Yeah, it's such an invasion of your privacy as well.
The fact that something wasn't taken is an aside, because had they wanted something that I had, it would have been taken. Yeah.
Okay, and the question of, where do we put the perfume, Wendy? If you are going to fly with
in
perfume,
your hand luggage.
Yeah, but you're limited in the amount that you can take with you.
Not
so
with
we
domestic.
have to start. I suppose on domestic, it's all right.
Yeah.
If you're traveling internationally, it's time to start investing in some miniatures, I guess. Yeah. I was smiling at Andrew. Andrew tells me in the old days I used to put a very realistic fake snake on top of my luggage contents after I'd had a few ransacking and theft episodes, and it never happened again. Just don't open your suitcase anywhere near my mum, Andrew. You might be liable for some of these medical expenses.
Just as an aside, we've got so much content, I probably shouldn't go here, but I had a case a few years ago where this family came back from the States, and this little girl under 10 had a plush snake. It was very obvious, one of those sort of velveteen sort of, those
toy,
ones.
yes.
Toy. And it was confiscated because they said to her, because if someone on the air in the plane saw it, it could cause mass panic and be a danger to the plane. I promise
fluffy
you.
snake.
It was fluffy. I promise you. It was. We're not talking one of those toy shop ones that are plastic and made to look
real.
Yes. I mean, I tried that on my windowsill when the birds kept picking at the reflections, but I can tell you now it doesn't work. I've got about 5 of these snakes at home. Maybe I should use them.
Use them when traveling. Now you know. Wendy, before we move on to the next topic, a couple of car-related questions coming in. I think after hearing you mention the offer to purchase story. Anonymous saying, what happens if you buy a defective new car from the dealership floor? While driving home, I picked up the mechanical noise. What would the legal options be?
Oh my gosh, this answer could take up the rest of the show.
Okay.
Because cars are quite tricky because of their value. It's not the same thing you'd think it should, but it's not like getting a toaster. The toaster malfunctions the first time you try and use it, and then you can go back in terms of the Consumer Protection Act. You've got 6 months in which to return a defective item for your choice of a refund, replacement, or repair. Provided they can send it off for a technical assessment, and if they find that you poured water in your toaster before you used it, then
you've lost your rights.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a nice straightforward example. With cars, yes, they come with a 6-month CPA warranty on top of the manufacturer's warranty, which is 3, 5, 7 years depending on the brand.
Okay.
But it is not the case that if you take a car in with a funny noise or the stitching's coming out in the leather or whatever, that you can drive straight back to the dealership and say, thanks ever so much, but I don't want it. Give me a new one or give me my money back. That is not going to happen. So practically, they will have a chance to repair it, as the warranty suggests, and the part that is faulty is considered the product in that case, right?
Okay.
So if it is a safety critical issue like braking or steering, they get one bite at the cherry, and then they have to make another plan, take the car back, replace it, whatever. They can't keep. Obviously, that would be completely prejudicial to the consumer. But for the first problem with the car, you can't, as with a toaster, take it back and say, I don't want you to repair this. I want you to replace or refund me. That's not going to work with a car. That's oversimplifying the story, but that is the practical outcome. Yes.
So, I mean, before you go running to a lawyer, obviously you go back to the dealership and say, well, look, I've had this issue. Give them an opportunity to deal with it professionally, and one hopes that most would do so. But
I would say my advice would be is that 6 months period is golden. And what some dealerships do is they drag it out and then by the time it gets to, this car is not fixable, they are not able to fix it, then your 6 months has slid on by. So I would say start documenting everything.
Okay.
Very important. Dates, who you spoke to, what they did when you sent the car in. They must give you a courtesy car. If they don't have a courtesy car, they must arrange for alternative mobility, Uber, or if possible, something like that. It's not okay for them to just say, we can't do it. Is that what you've just...
Well, to the next question, which has come in from Katrin, speaking on exactly this issue. She said, we purchased a second-hand vehicle and from day 2, it gave us trouble. We had bought a maintenance plan in order to attend to the problems. After 6 months of not being able to get the problem sorted out, the dealer took the car back and refunded us in full. Her question, though, is would we have a right to claim the cost of the maintenance plan from the dealership as well as the ongoing Uber fares to bring that car in for repairs?
That's a very interesting question because there are two things at play here. When the motor industry ombudsman adjudicates these cases, when there is a take back of the car, they allow for mileage to be deducted. In other words, the thinking there is that if you weren't driving that car, or didn't have the use of that car, even though it was sporadic if it's going wrong, you would have had to spend that money on Uber, on this and that. And so there is an actual formula per kilometer that they deduct. And I get a lot of complaints about this because people think it's unfair, but that's the way it is. So you might find that if they applied that formula, you might not win even once you've deducted what you feel your costs that needed to be deducted. So it's just something to bear in mind. I was thinking that story was going to end differently when she got to the end of the 6-month period, and then
they tried
but they did take it back, which is something. So secondhand cars have the same, and secondhand anything have the same. You have the same rights under the CPA, unless they pointedly say to you, "This is a very old car. Please note that the thermostat needs replacing, whatever," and you accept that. Then you can't go back and say the thermostat's
fix the
broken.
thermostat. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that.
Lunch with Pippa Hudson
on CapeTalk.